cloud. And let me do one thing first. Okay. All right, I'm going to start broadcasting. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks. We need just a moment while we get our captioning set up. So we'll start in just a few seconds. And if you're just joining us, we're just working to get the captioning set up. We will start in just a moment. Okay. Sylvia, I've authorized you to type the captioning. All right. Thanks for your patience. We should be going in just a second. So let's just get a test. Okay. Looks like we're up and running. All right. Thanks for your patience, everyone. We'll go ahead and start now. So again, if you're just joining, we just took a moment to get the captioning running. Obviously need to have that working before we can go, so thanks for your patience. I'm Tim Fuchs with the National Council on Independent Living. I want to welcome you all to today's teleconference and webinar, Supporting Your CIL Board for Success. As always, this presentation is brought to you by the CILNet Training and Technical Assistance Project for Centers for Independent Living. As you all know, the CILNet is operated through a partnership among NICL here in Washington, D.C., ILRU in Houston, Texas, April in North Little Rock, and Utah State University's Center for Persons with Disabilities. So there's just a few things that I want to mention today before we get started. First of all is that, as always, we are recording today's presentation so that you can access it on ILRU's website. That archive is usually available in just about 48 hours, often sooner than that. And then we are going to have ample time for questions today. I hope you all will take advantage of that. We'll have a question break on slide 31 about halfway through, and then we'll have a final Q&A break at the end of the presentation today. So please don't be shy. We really want to make lots of time for you all to discuss the topic and ask questions of Ann and Paula. There's a few ways that you can submit your questions today, depending on how you're participating. If you're new to Zoom, I want to draw your attention to the menu bar at the bottom of the screen. Sometimes it will auto-hide. So if you don't see it, you can move your cursor around the bottom center of your screen and you'll see those options come up. One of them is the Q&A feature. And you can type your questions there. You all are welcome to type your questions anytime during the presentation. We will wait until our Q&A breaks to address them, though. And I want to also remind you all that, as always, captioning is available on today's presentation. The closed captioning within Zoom, there is an arrow in the upper right-hand corner of the captioning box. First of all, if you don't see your captioning, you can select More under your options in the menu bar, and you should see an option that says Closed Caption. And so if you don't see the captioning, you can turn it on that way. And you can manipulate the size of the captioning box by clicking that arrow. Unfortunately, you can't manipulate the font size or contrast there. If you'd like to do that, I'd encourage you all to use the full screen cart captioning on stream text. That URL is a little too long to read out now, but that was included in the confirmation email that you all received. So that's the better option if you want to make the font size larger or manipulate the contrast or anything else. There is also a chat feature there. I've got it open on my screen. I'm logged in. So if you're focused on the full screen cart captioning and you want to ask a question or make a comment today, you're welcome to enter it there, and I'll be sure to voice it for you during our breaks. Last is the chat feature. So there is a chat feature. We prefer that you submit your questions in the Q&A tab. But if you submit a comment in the chat, or if you accidentally submit a question in the chat, no problem. We'll see it and we'll make sure to ask those as well. The chat is a great place to, you can send messages to folks that you know, that you see in the audience list. You're also welcome to send comments there. Or if you're having any technical issues, that's a great place to submit them too. Sharon Finney from ILRU is just kind enough to include that link to the full page of captioning and stream text. You can find that in the chat right now. So that's just some of the housekeeping that I wanted to do about Zoom. I know a lot of you are getting used to this platform, probably through ILNet and other ways. We found it very easy to use and quite accessible too. So I hope you find that to be true today. So before we start and go on to our presentation, I just want to take a moment to go through some of these next slides and to introduce our presenters for today. So I want to welcome Ann Weeks and Paula McElwee to the call. And Ann and Paula, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedules to be with us and to share your expertise with everyone. I doubt that either of you needs an introduction in the IL movement anymore, but for those of you that have not had the pleasure of meeting Paula and Ann, Paula, of course, is the Technical Assistance Coordinator at ILRU, ILRU out of Houston, Texas, but Paula works from her home in Fresno. Ann is with us. Ann is the Executive Director of Mountain State Center for Independent Living in and around the Huntington area of West Virginia. And anyway, they've worked to put these slides together for you all. They've worked very hard over the last few weeks, and I think they've got a great presentation, and I just want to thank them for being willing to do this. I also wanted to go over just these learning objectives quickly here on slide 4. So we're going to cover a few things today. First of all, effective strategies that support an organization's board in recruitment and orientation, training and professional development, including succession planning, effective communications, and development and fundraising. We're going to cover the components of an effective board member orientation plan, how the performance evaluation of the executive director can result in better aligned expectations and goals for the organization and for the executive director, how to determine, oops, excuse me, I need to move my own menu bar here. How to determine the leadership gaps in your current board and focus on your recruitment on filling those gaps. And finally, strategies for running smooth, highly effective board meetings. All right, that's the end of my little intro. I'm going to go to slide 5 and turn it over to Paula, who's going to continue. Paula?
Thank you very much, Tim. We're going to talk first about how you recruit good board members, because that's an important task. And sometimes I've visited different centers where the executive director will say to me, well, that's the board's job. It's the board's job to recruit new board members. And that probably is technically true, but that doesn't mean that your board members necessarily know the people who need to be on your board. And we find that often the executive director is actually the person who's out and about the most, that represents your center, that goes to meetings with other community members, that is connecting with other disability-related organizations in your community. And so the executive director really needs to keep your eyes open for those potential board members. And that's the first thing that we wanted to suggest to you that helps to support your board, is to always keep your eyes open for potential board members to include. To do that, you do need to know what the gaps are in your leadership, both in representation geographically, maybe if you serve a large area, cross disabilities. So you want to make sure that you have people who represent different disabilities on your board. We're going to go into this a little bit more later, but you get the idea. If there are gaps in your leadership, you don't have anybody who really gets the financial statements. You know, how can you find somebody who gets the financial statements? Know where those gaps in leadership are happening and have in your mind, oh yeah, I need to keep my eyes open for, you know, whoever it is that you need to keep your eyes open for. Sometimes that's ethnicity. Sometimes you're looking for age. Sometimes you're all kinds of demographic things that give you a good mix of people on your board of directors. Those are the kinds of things that the executive director can look for in the people that he or she meets out in the community as they go about their business of being the ED. And then you can recruit to those gaps. Once you've understood the gaps, you can keep your eyes and ears open, as I said, and really recruit for those gaps specifically. Another thing that we sometimes suggest that some centers have found very effective is that you do some kind of leadership development for people with disabilities in your community. And from that leadership development, ask yourself, could some of these people be good board members too? Now, when you're doing that leadership development, you're not necessarily recruiting for your board only, but you're also helping the disability community to think about representation on the local housing council, on the transportation board, on any of those things that happen in your community that are directly related to the independence of some of the folks that you serve. Often your staff ends up going to all of those meetings. And a question we would ask you is that really the best way to deal with it? Or should we broaden the expertise within the disability community so that some of our consumers feel comfortable taking that leadership role and applying to be on those councils as well? And so if you do local leadership development of some sort, which we think is a really good idea, then you're going to run across local leaders that might also serve on your board and be a positive additional person on your board of directors. You know, if you also have an application process so that when someone's suggested, they don't kind of automatically end up on your board, you can certainly ask board members and staff to share the names of people or to give people an application. Maybe you have an application form that the nominating committee will consider later, and the nominating committee will screen the applicants. Then encourage the people that are connected to your organization to take those applications and get them to people that they think might be good board members. So board members can recruit other board members that way. Staff certainly can. Consumers, if you've got consumer groups where you could drop in to a group meeting and say, hey, does anybody know anybody? Make sure that you pass these applications out. Maybe some of you are interested. You know, here's an application. That process is going to very much help you to screen so that you don't feel like you have to take every application, but to screen for those things that you were missing, those gaps in leadership representation that we were talking about just a second ago. Let's look at the next slide on this. So you would, in that recruitment of board members, be sure that you include the board members in the conversation with the potential board member. So one board member could attend with the executive director, for example, and that potential board member could explain, the existing board member could explain things to the potential board member to understand the programs and what the role of the board is and that kind of thing. It's always really good if another board member, nominating committee chair often, could be participating in that first conversation with the potential board member. And the board member can also let their person know why they suggested them as a potential board member. So if somebody was nominated, so to speak, by another board member or by a consumer or something else, you know, you can let them know that they were thought of highly and that they are in the application process. And if the referral was from a board member, that current board member may be the best person to set up the initial meeting anyway with a potential member. So if you've got a board member that knows an applicant or is suggesting an applicant, that board member would make good sense to be with the executive director for that first conversation with a person about the board. Now, when you're having that first conversation, I just want to also say, this is a chance to build relationships whether or not the person's name goes forward as a potential board member. So be sure that as you're having that conversation, you're saying to that potential board member, you're one of the applicants. We have several positions that we're filling. We're looking for XYZ. If you're not selected at this time, I hope it's okay with you if we keep your application on file for later. Do whatever you need to do to preserve the relationship in case they aren't elected, as well as if they are elected. You want either way to have a good relationship with the people who've applied, and make sure that you do that. Let's look at the next slide. Now, I'm sure you've noticed that not every person with a physical or obvious disability is interested in what centers do. It's unfortunate, but true, that not everybody with a disability that you might meet around town is necessarily interested in what centers do, unless your center is a meeting place for leaders who have disabilities. And if you do that, if you have reasons why people come together, maybe systems advocacy, maybe the celebration of a key event like the passage of the Americans with Disability Act, maybe there are some other things that you have a Disability Awareness Day, whatever those things are, find ways that you bring people who are leaders into your center so that they might have an opportunity to learn what you do, and that they might have a chance then to also share with you why they're interested, what their impression is of the center in the community, and maybe you can develop some interest that way. Let's look at the next slide. So the next question is, can a consumer become a board member? Now, the requirement is that more than 50% or 51% or more of the people on your board are people with a significant disability. Significant disability is actually in the language of the law and the regulations. And significant disability means that the board members that you're having a majority of people with significant disabilities represent your consumers, because that's the other group that to be eligible for services must have a significant disability. That's the only eligibility criteria that we have for who we serve. So absolutely, a board member can become a consumer, and a consumer can become a board member, and it is not in and of itself a conflict of interest. Sometimes I have people say that it is. You know, they say, well, you know, isn't it a conflict of interest because they receive services, so they're going to have more interest in the services they receive than in anything else. You know, it isn't a conflict of interest unless the board member causes a conflict of interest by acting like a board member when they're in the role of consumer. We're going to talk about roles in just a minute, but sometimes you have more than one. And in the case that a consumer is also a board member, they're wearing two different hats. And we absolutely want to make sure that the disability community is active and participating in our board, but not acting in their own interest in a way that's problematic for your board. And that may be a role discussion that you need to have with that person who's coming on board, so that they understand kind of up front they aren't a board member when they're in the center doing other things. So the board is only the board when, I always say the board is only the board when all of the board is meeting together, or a quorum of the board is meeting together. A single member of the board doesn't get to take on the role of speaking for the board unless the board has asked them to do that in some setting. So sometimes the board will say, well, would you speak for us at a city council meeting or whatever. But as you look at that whole issue of who has a potential conflict of interest, that's when the conflict happens, is when someone tries to be a board member when they are not acting in the role of a board. So unless they've been instructed by the board, by a motion that passed, to do something specific as a board member, they are not speaking as the board. And that's something people sometimes need to understand. That's also true of the board chair, by the way. This is a sidebar. But I have seen individuals that were wonderful board members suddenly become very much micromanagers or whatever, because they don't understand that the officer's role is still only within the context of the board. And unless they have been delegated to do something specific for the board, their role is to be at the board as a member and not other places. So it's important to keep the roles straight. It's important that our community has a chance for people to cross over into other roles, but still know which role they're filling. I think that we're stronger when we do this, but I think sometimes we do have to clarify roles just a little bit. Ann, do you have anything to add on that particular issue? I thought I saw a smile and a nod there.
Yeah, well, we've experienced that in somewhat, particularly in our Beckley office, that consumer board members sometimes like to say, well, I'm a board member, and so therefore this is what we want to do, or this is, whatever. So we have to kind of back up and have some refresher courses so we can help them understand what their role as a board member is, as opposed to what their role as a consumer is. So it can become a problem. Yeah.
It's real important that we keep it straight, because it's not a problem until it's a problem, but it can be an issue that sometimes is problematic for the board. Let's look at that next slide. So let's talk about recruitment a little bit. I mentioned an accessible application form, and we do suggest that you have some kind of an application and that it's available to the public in some way. Now, you can put it in your newsletter if you still mail out a newsletter. You can post it on your website. You can hand paper copies to people that you feel might be good at recruiting people for you. But somehow you need an easily accessible application form so that people who are interested in your board can send in an application. Now, when you're taking applications from the community at large, I know it sounds like you might have a whole bunch of applications you have to deal with, but that isn't typically the case. Typically, there are a lot of people who don't know about us, and we still have to say to them, hey, come and learn more about our work. And there may be points at which you might say, hey, would you be interested in applying for a board position? And you might share that. But we don't usually have so many applications that it's difficult to manage. Typically, there aren't a lot of them. And typically, there's either a small nominating committee. Sometimes the vice president has that role of chairing the nominating committee. Usually it includes the executive director, of course, and then maybe another board member or two. But you need somebody who reviews the application for the things that you're looking for. So when we talk about how you categorize the vacancies that you feel you might have on your board, you need to kind of look at those characteristics, because you're trying to match the right person to that opening. And you don't want to feel like you have to move in somebody who's really doesn't meet the needs of the board. So do review it, and do make sure that you then meet with the person, because some people present really well on paper, but may not quite be ready for the board in other ways. And some people don't present well on paper, but might be excellent persons. So do kind of keep in mind that whole process of the applications is still, we are finding the right people for the vacancies we have right now. Who meets with the potential board member? Usually there's an interview process that happens before you invite them to a board meeting. This nominating committee, or whatever you call that specific group, would typically be sure that they were ready to present people, and that means they've reviewed their applications. If you're doing any vetting of people's reputation in your community, you've taken care of that, and you're inviting them to attend a board meeting and meet more people only after you've been pretty sure that they would be a good good folks to be added to your board. And then you do need to have a policy and procedure around this process. And one of the questions in the process is, when is the nomination presented to the board for a vote? Does the nominee attend a board meeting first? Or do they attend a meeting with the subject on the agenda and they meet and then you ask them to leave and then you vote? Or do they attend and you vote next time? But you need to think through what process works well for you related to that nomination, so that you're treating people the best way that you can, and preserving the relationship, and yet making sure your board gets the folks you most want to have. Let's look at the next slide. So we mentioned we were going to find those gaps in leadership. And when you look at this, we suggest you look at the geographic. So some of you serve multiple counties, for example, or all of, you want to look at that as one of your areas. Including a specific group on your board is one of the steps to doing outreach. So what about your outreach? Who have you identified as underserved or unserved communities? You just did your 704 report a few weeks ago, and or your program progress report, and you're identifying who are unserved and underserved communities. Well, one of the best ways to serve an unserved community is to have representation on your board, because that person who's representing that community is going to help you with any cultural specific things that come with that community. So make sure that those communities are represented on your board, and make sure that you've identified what they are and you're looking for that representation. And I can tell you some boards that I've served on that there has been a significant change in how people access the centers when their group is represented on your center's board. So make sure that you are good at that. You might look at ages as well. You're required to serve all ages and all disabilities. Most people are reluctant to put somebody under age 18 on a board because the board has legal responsibility, but you can have a youth representative who's 18 and older. You can certainly choose to have a person on your board who is not 18, as long as you've dealt with what that means as far as the legal side of things. But make sure you have good diversity on your board of directors. Let's look at that next slide. So the first step to reaching out is this, including people on your board. Also look at business people. Do you have one or more business people on your board of directors who understands financial statements, for example, and asks for the right ones? You know, sometimes the executive director presents what they've always presented, but there's some specific concern that the board has. Well, what's the report that would address that concern? And sometimes you just need somebody who understands that, who can say, boy, I really would like to see an aging report. If it's been a problem that we're not paying our bills on time, or we're not getting paid by our funders on time, maybe we need to see an aging report for receivables. Maybe we need to see an aging report for our payments, so that we know that they are or not on time. So what's 30 days, what's 60 days, what's 90 days, what's more than 90 days. It's going to help us to understand cash flow issues. And so we need that right now. Not every center runs that all the time, but sometimes there's a specific need. Who knows that on your board so they can ask those questions, because you want those questions asked? And who on your board represents a local university or other learning institutions? It's always excellent to have somebody who specifically represents the local university and can give you ways to collaborate with that entity. And do you have somebody on the board whose background makes them a good spokesperson for the center as a whole? And then, of course, do more than 50% of your board members identify as having a significant disability? And just a note about this, more than 50%, you'll see that I always say it that way, more than 50%. That's because that's the language that's actually in the law and regulations. Casually, we have made that 51% or more. They mean the same thing, but I'm just repeating the language there that is actually a part of the whole. So let's look at that last slide for my section here. That's next one. Most of the time you'll see a grid, and we have a sample that you can find there that's from a board recruitment resource that's online. A lot of education around board members, in fact, can be found at nonprofit board websites online. There are a lot of them, but we have a sample here of a matrix, and a matrix means you've identified how many openings you have and how many board members you already have, and you've checked off what the boxes for what they bring to your board. And somebody can bring more than one. So this person is from Johnson County. They are, you know, over 65. They are, you know, they have a visual impairment, and you just check off what they have, and great knowledge on financial reports. So you check off the expertise on your little matrix or your chart, and that helps you to see where the gaps are. So take a look at that matrix and think about adopting something like that so that your nominating committee can plan for where are we missing out, what are we missing. So take a look at that. And an individual, like I said, can have more than one check mark on the matrix. But if there are gaps, then you want to seek out people who meet those specific gaps. Okay, and I'll turn it over to Ann.
Okay, Paula, thank you. Okay, so you have to also make sure that the board members understand their roles. Sometimes board members are willing to serve, but do not really have a understanding of what their role is going to be. So as Paula had mentioned earlier, that even the board chair, unless he or she has been asked by the board to be a spokesperson, they do not have the real freedom to go out and speak on behalf of the entire board. Only the full board can speak for the whole board. And one of the problems that crops up a lot is the understanding of the fact that the executive director is in charge of the day-to-day operations, and that the board members are not to be in the center on a day-to-day basis, micromanaging what's happening in a particular area or a particular program, and any questions that they may have about something, they need to direct them to the ED. Someone who may be good in finances may be concerned about how the financial reports are done, and instead of coming to the ED, they may go to the accounting department first, and that is doing micromanagement. So the ED needs to be the first person that they talk to about what their concerns are. The board members do have the responsibility of examining the financial status, though, of the organization. And that's done several ways, through the executive director, the auditor, or a finance committee. I know our auditor is required by his regulations every year to give a report to the board about what they've discovered in the audit. It's a good thing to ask the question, like if you're not getting financial status at your board meetings, you may want to ask the executive director, how come you're not getting them on a regular basis? That may be an issue, and that certainly is a duty of the board. Also, if there's a complaint against the ED, that certainly may involve the board. Otherwise, the board should have the authority to be handling complaints. If there's a complaint about a staff person regarding how they're treating people in a program, that is a complaint that should be directed towards the executive director. Now, if you should have a policy for handling complaints, and eventually it could go back to the board because they're like the last level of making a decision, but only should a complaint against the executive director start with the board. Next slide, Tim, please. Okay, components of an effective orientation plan. if you ask yourself about going on a board, and several of you may be on a board that is different than the Center for Independent Living, and you know how you feel kind of out of water when you go because you're not sure exactly what they're talking about, well, that's the same feeling that people have when they come to serve on a center board. And sometimes I think serving on a center board is even a little more overwhelming because of so many programs that the centers do and so many possible different funding sources and different types of programs and staff being in charge of this or that, and it can get confusing for some time. So you always need to think about doing an orientation. And there are a lot of ways that you can do an orientation. You could set up a meeting to have right before the board meeting, depending on how long your board meetings are. You could do it the day before. You could just pick a random day and do it. Or the thing that we have decided lately is that we are allowing time at each board meeting to talk about a certain part of our board reference manual that we have because we thought there are probably some older board members who don't understand some of the stuff either, and that hopefully it will help them as well. So next slide, please, Tim. So what we're doing is doing this so that all the board members can have access to the board resource material so that they know what is going on. But we also try a couple times per year to provide training on a specific topic, whether it be leadership development or the relationship to our funders, IL philosophy, consumer control. Sometimes, depending on what our budget is, we try to give board members an opportunity to attend the NICL conference so they can see a wider picture of independent living. So there are a lot of ways that you can provide additional training to board members. There, a lot of the topics that we talk about also arise because of people not understanding their roles. And sometimes if they've been serving on more than one board, there may be a board that does things a certain way and this board doesn't do them that way, and so there can be some confusion. So certainly always being available to answer the questions will help eliminate any conflicts. One of the things that we do is that we try to get pictures for our board members to put on our website. We ask them to write a few sentences about themselves. To add to that, our web designer will call them if they are willing, and she will interview them so that then she can write a story about them to put on the board, so that that also gets them vested in what we're doing. Next slide, please, Tim. We have this board notebook that we use, and it's a 3-inch notebook, and it's almost full. And we recommend that when we put the minutes in there, that they only keep the current year and the previous year on there, because if they've been on the board for a while, that the number of minutes that they have could overwhelm that notebook. But you'll see here we've got a whole list of the types of things that we put in our board notebook. The IL philosophy, history, and our history, our bylaws, our articles of incorporation. We have board job descriptions, both for the general board members as well as the officers. We put in the policies and procedures, personnel policies. We put in the Title VII of the Rehab Act so that they can read that. Next slide, please, Tim. We have a list and an explanation of all the programs. We give them a copy of the budget, a board roster, all their names and contact, the staff roster, all of our brochures, and as I mentioned, the immediate past year minutes plus the current year, and also the same with the financial statements and the latest annual audit. And as you can see, as this list is growing, that it's an awful lot of information for people to retain in a couple hours or in one day. And so that's why we've decided that we're going to do it a little bit at a time at each board member, at each board meeting. And the last board meeting that we had was in January, and we had, of course, submitted the 704 report, or PPR. And so that was what we went over at the January meeting, because particularly for the new board members, it gave them an opportunity to see what kinds of reporting we do. It gave everybody a chance to see how many people we served, what kinds of projects we did out in the community, and that. So it took us a little while to get through it, but that's what we decided to work on first. So that's what we did. Next slide, please. Again, there's more stuff here that we put in there. We have a set record for time and day for the meetings. And we also have an extensive glossary of acronyms. We're all bad about using them. And, you know, as anybody comes to a new place with an alphabet soup that they have no idea what, you know, you're talking about. We have our vision and mission statements. We have our current strategic plan, the current year's work plan. And like I said, the PPR that we just had completed, we shared with them. They also have a current copy of the state plan for independent living. We have a strategic plan that is 10 years, and it expires in 2021. And we, every year, use that strategic plan to develop the current year's work plan so that we have that consistency with both products. And then also when we do our minutes, I mean, not our minutes, but our agenda for the board meeting, those minutes include the primary goals that have been included in the strategic plan. So when we talk about being financially responsible as one of our primary goals, that's where we talk about the financial report and anything that has to do with finances. So we do that, and so our agendas look a little odd, and so certainly for new board members we have to explain about how we're doing them, why they're doing, but when they see the strategic plan and they'll see those goals on there, it makes it a little bit easier for them to understand. Next slide. Okay, we still have the contents on here. We talk about the information and relationship with the State Independent Living Council. We have our Facebook page, copies on there. We put our social media addresses and our website information on there so that they can also access that. We give them ILRU's website so that they can go there and at their leisure. We went through it and showed them. We did a screenshot of the home page and gave it to them, and I kind of explained how they could find different things so they could go look at stuff if they were so inclined. We have to consider things like being accessible. We do large print things a good bit of the time, and sometimes we put them on a flash drive for people that want to have them in a verbal way or show them on a computer. And who is responsible for keeping them up to date? Well, that would be me and my assistant. And so we have to, much to Angie's chagrin, I'll come out to her sometimes and say, I've been thinking. And a lot of people who used to work for me who will know that when I say I've been thinking, that probably means something is going to happen. And so anyway, but we are responsible for keeping the information up to date so the board members will know what's going on. Next slide. We also, this is kind of like in the board packet at first, but we also do it like after we first get board members on the board. We're a membership corporation in that people, all consumers are automatic lifetime members of the center, and then other people pay a minimum of $5 to become a member. But it's the membership at the annual meeting are the ones who vote on the board members. So once the board members have been voted on and approved, then we have a contact form for them so that we can have their correct mailing information and all their methods of contact, because some people may prefer to be contacted only by mail, some only by their cell phone, whatever, so that way Angie, my assistant, knows how to contact them. And we also try to assign a mentor board meeting to people, so that a mentor board member to people, so that they can make introductions, kind of be the gatekeeper for the other board members and explain to them different things. One of our new board members knows our secretary treasurer, and she called her after her first meeting and was, asking her various questions, and Harriet was assuring her that it takes a while to get, kind of acclimated to everything that goes on and stuff. So that's a good practice to also think about. Is that my last slide? Oh, I guess I'm doing this one too.
No,
right?
I think.
No, I think I can do it.
Okay, Paula.
Paul, I'll take over.
But you can jump in for
No,
sure at any point. Yeah. We were just talking about in these slides how you do it on an ongoing basis. So Anna's covered like how you get them started, right? But as we all know, the board members do not live and breathe your center like you do. And you need to offer them opportunities as much as possible to keep in touch and to understand and to know what it is that you are doing. So one of the things you can do on an ongoing basis is ask them what training they want. You can do this at several different ways or several different approaches. You can give them a survey and let them check off the boxes. You can ask them informally. You can ask them formally as a part of planning or as a part of a meeting. But ask them, because some of them have probably been wanting to understand some specific thing for a long time. A real favorite is that ABC glossary that Ann was mentioning, and we do have one also on our website if you'd like to borrow that and use it for your board members, because it doesn't take very long for even a new executive director to start using some of that lingo, some of those abbreviations, because it just is simple, and then forget, oh yeah, I need to tell them that the SPIL is the state plan for independent living, and so it's just really a good way to ask them, and that is one of the common ones that they want to know about. I've suggested to a number of centers, and I think that this is very, very valuable to you, that you could make a training element at each board meeting and take 30 minutes or less and hit 12 topics a year, or maybe 11 or 10 or whatever your board schedule is. But we have a lot of those online where you could just take, from this point to this point on a video and share that with your board. You can do that on history and philosophy. We've got a lot of sections on that. You can do it on any of these webinars. If the whole topic is too much, because it usually takes us about an hour and a half, you still may want to go in and use, from slide 10 to slide 21. And you can start and stop the video related to that topic, and you can narrow it down so it's more manageable for your board presentation. You can also provide printed materials in the same way, provide those at the beginning of the meeting, keep it short, but provide ongoing training and professional development for your members of your board. It really does help them to have something like that in place on a regular basis. You do have our permission to take that off of our website. So as long as you give us credit, you're welcome to use any of our training materials. So please know that, like Tim said, all of this is available and free and uploaded shortly. So you can use this or want any of our other training that are for board members specifically. Also, when the board is considering a decision, one of the things that's helpful is to recap the history of how you came to that conclusion. Because sometimes the board members don't understand all the ins and outs, but they don't want to ask, or they don't remember, but they don't want to ask. So it's nice to provide a one-sheet description of the issue. What is the issue? What are the things that you've considered as possible solutions? What is your recommendation? I always call this a brief. you know, because it's brief. You want to keep it short, but it summarizes the decision that the board is considering and gives them information so that they can very quickly see, oh yeah, we talked about this. It's been 4 years. We do need to revisit this, you know, and you just give them that information in a quick one sheet look so that every decision that's made, the board has in their hands what they need to make that decision. And also be sure to budget for and provide opportunities for board members, maybe 1 or 2 a year, to attend national conferences or regional conferences if you have them, but make sure that the board has a chance to get a flavor of the independent living movement as a whole, because it's very different than what they might understand if they only see, you know, that rare look at your center when everything's closed because it's evening and the board, you know, whatever it is that they see a limited amount of what everything is. So do kind of keep that in mind and think about ongoing opportunities. How about that next slide, Tim? So one of the things that we want to mention specifically is our website. The ILRU website is the place where we put all of the things that are related to this training. All of the webinars show up there. Often the on-site training that we've provided, we often have videos, of course, captioned videos related to that, and all the information and handouts related to that topic. And we keep those for several years because we can't cover every topic in an on-site training. Some of those are very valuable. So it's been 2 or 3 years now, I can't remember, since we've done the financial management training. It's 3 days of intense training on that topic. And if you want to go in and find the video that has to do with what costs are and are not allowable, you can go in there and pull that out and say, okay, I'm going to talk about allowable and non-allowable expenses because my board keeps bugging me to feed them dinner and I don't have any money to do it with because I can't do it with federal dollars or whatever else it is that you're dealing with. And so make sure that you pull out whatever it is that you think you need and make sure that you have in place a way for the board to review that. And one of the ways to do it is from the website. Taking people to the conference, of course, as we mentioned, provide specific leadership training. If you've got less experienced board members, they may need to have some training in how to be on a board. And that would be something that you could provide as a leadership training. And also invite them to some of these webinars. I know that the board that I serve on here send out an invitation to all the board members to check this one out. I don't know how many took them up on it because I didn't go meet with them. I did this from my computer instead, but that gives you an idea. Next slide, please. So here is the website, and if that isn't big enough for you to see and you want to enlarge it a little bit, you can do that, or you can go to this site at ilru.org, and what you'll see there is the home page. And I just want to point out a few things for you related to training that are there on the home page. The first one on the left is a search, and that's where your search button is related to a specific topic. So if you're looking for any specific topic, you can find it there. If you can't find it, don't spend a lot of time, just drop me a note and I'll find it for you. So that's part of the technical assistance we provide. If you plug something in and it doesn't give you what you were looking for, you know, we'll be glad to help you find that specifically. You also see a mailing list sign up on the left. So if you're interested in receiving the notices of this and other training events, you can certainly do that way. Upcoming training you'll see there, job postings, latest news. We have a lot of information that you can look at. In the center, you'll find the directories. So we have now 3 directories. The first one is for centers. So if you click on that, it'll take you to a US map and you pick the area and you go and see how many centers there are so that when you're on vacation, you can go visit a center or whatever. Do go in there and look at your own listing because we depend on you to keep it up to date. And so if you've had any recent changes of address or email or location, be sure and let us know so that we can adding your Facebook page because we've added that. So be sure and let us know if that's the case. You will also see a new directory for state associations. Not every state has an association of centers, but those who do, we try to list those separately. So you can go in and look at the state associations for centers. And then on the right-hand column in that center section, you'll see a directory of silks. So you can also click on that and go in and see the silks for that state. And there's other information there too, but those are the ones that I find I use the most, are those 3 directories when I'm trying to look for somebody or you know, find out who is there. The topical training on the right-hand column is very similar to what you'll see if you click on that training tab. You can't do it on this slide, but when you're in the site, click on that training tab and it will list on demand, and you can go to on demand training, and it's mostly these topics that are found here. So you can do it either with that column or with training, because it does give you a couple of other options besides the on demand. So take a look at whatever topic you want, because we have a lot of them. So be sure that as you're looking at that, that you're very aware of the options that are available. There are so many options that they may be overwhelming if you're looking for something narrow and you're having trouble kind of sorting it. Again, we can help you with that. So drop me an email or give me a phone call and we'll make sure that you find what it is you're looking for your board members. Let's look at that next slide. We also want to make sure that you have good communication between your meetings. So Anne has already mentioned a lot of this, but make sure that you know if your board members text or not. Do they check their email or not? Do they need everything on paper, or are they okay with documents that are attached to an email? So that's all something that you need to know about each person, because they aren't all going to be in the same place via technology. So you also want to make sure that you've invited your board members to anything you have in the community, even if you know they won't come, because it's a way for you to communicate to them what's happening, and they want to know what you're doing in the community. Because who knows, somebody there might say, oh, don't you have so-and-so on your board? Oh yeah. So you want to make sure that that's available to them. And if they don't typically attend, they may start attending when you start informing them of things. They may say, gee, I never have gone to any of these. I probably ought to go to this one. So it might be a way to also get your board involved in representing you in the community. If you have a booth there, you can certainly ask the board members if they'd like to volunteer at your booth to share information. Of course, don't leave them alone there if you don't think they know about you. But make sure they have staff with them who can answer questions about services. Do you have a Facebook page or a Twitter account, or make sure your board members know all the different ways that you are represented in social media, and include them. And ask them to like and follow your page and any other social media that you do. That'll help you keep them informed and have them know what's going on. And then let's look at that next slide. We suggest that you have one of your staff members attend each board meeting, for a quick presentation about the service that they offer. Now, in fairness, not all staff members are completely comfortable with this. It makes them very nervous sometimes. They say, I don't want to do it. So if that's the case, maybe 2 would come together, but make sure that the board has an opportunity to hear directly from staff what they're doing, because it'll make a much better impression on your board about how involved everybody is. And it gets them, kind of engaged in that larger picture. So, posting everyday happenings on your social media, also once they've joined, liked your Facebook page or whatever, does help them, as well as help the general public know what's going on. So it's good for you to keep putting the center's name out there and to include the board in that whenever you can. Okay, that's the end of that section. It's all yours, Anne.
And I think you're on mute. I saw you talking.
Okay, all right, there we go. Okay, so we're going to talk about running smooth, highly effective board members. They can be easily done. They can get off track sometimes, but if you have an agenda that you have a good idea of what's on there, if you discuss it with your chairperson prior to the time of the meeting so that the chair knows, you know, also what they're talking about, what's going to be talking about, it helps to make the meeting run a lot smoother. We have, as I said, we use our goals from our strategic plan as the topics, but we then usually have regular board type agenda items like approval of the minutes and approval of the financial statements. We have, each center has a consumer advocacy group, and their chair is an ex officio member of the board, and they always come and present what they have been up to, so we make sure that we've got a place on there all the time for them to come. We do have a call-in because we do have some board members who are in the Beckley office, and we also have a couple board members who are in the Charleston area, which is about an hour from Huntington. So we try to accommodate people as easily as they can so that they can participate. We also, I think it's on the next slide, that that there is an agenda type that's kind of like an annotated agenda that you and the chairperson could have that will tell you whatever the topic is. Is it just information? Is it something that you need a motion on? That also helps to move it forward. Sometimes the chair may not remember what you all talked about with the agenda, and so giving the chairperson an annotated agenda so that he or she will know what they're supposed to be doing at that minute and stuff also helps them be able to keep the meeting running smoothly. Next slide, please. I was just talking about the annotated agenda. And I've already told you about the 5 overall goals from the strategic plan. One of the things about the annotated agenda that I think is important is the fact that there is the opportunity for you as executive director to put specific notes on there for the chairperson. And if there would be a controversial issue that's coming up and you know that there may be some discussion because it's going to take a while because of the controversy, you can make sure that she remembers that that's going to happen so that she allows the time for the discussion, but also knows that she may have to rein in the discussion after a certain period of time. Next slide. Next slide, Tim. This is the copy of the chart that you can give to the chairperson, that it talks about who's responsible. The minutes are there, the secretary is responsible, and you need a motion to accept the minutes. You should allow time for public comment, and that's basically if someone wants to come to your meeting, as they should be open to the public. If there's going to be a report, these are some examples on the strategic plan. The executive director is going to talk about that, and it's for information only. The financial statements for the past month, those would be given by the treasurer. They also would need a motion to be accepted. And then you can have the reports from the different program managers, which again would just be information only. And then if there are other committee chairs that have their reports that are given, the development committee, the nomination committee, whatever, and sometimes those are going to require a motion depending on what the topic is that they're giving to you. But by using this type of chart to give to the chairperson, it kind of helps to move the meeting along too, because they know what they have to make sure that they have motions on. Slide. The minutes of the meeting need to reflect the discussions that were held and the decisions that were made, but it doesn't have to be a transcript of the meeting. And sometimes putting too much information into a meeting can get you in trouble, as I have experienced many years ago with a couple of disgruntled staff people when we were doing more capturing the actual discussions that were being held because they were using the minutes. So you want to be able to have the minutes reflect the discussion points that are important, and then what the decision was made, the vote that was taken, whether it was unanimous or that was, you know, with one abstention or 2 nays, so that that's reflected there. But that's important, but you don't need to write down every single word. It doesn't need to be a transcript. One of the things that's important for whether it is your secretary of the board that is taking the minutes or if you designate somebody, in our case, I have my assistant Angie taking the minutes, and she, you know, has to be sure that she gets the motion down right, because sometimes people want to have it read back to them. And so you need to make sure that whoever is taking the minutes can be sure that they get it down. And sometimes they have to ask exactly what was it said, because of they'll start making the motion and then it kind of goes on. And so you kind of like, what was the emotion in the first place? And you know, it's kind of hard to have this kind of more casual board, I guess I would say, be as diligent to using Robert's rules, as far as, you know, having to have a motion to make a motion, and, you know, and all the things that sometimes happen at more Robert's rule type meetings. So make sure that everybody gets the words down to the motions exactly right. Next slide. Okay, executive sessions. Sometimes it's necessary to have an executive session because of something that may be of a sensitive nature. We don't typically do them too often in the board meeting, because we also have an executive committee meeting that we have right prior to the board meeting. And the executive committee serves as the personnel committee. So if there's a personnel issue, they would discuss it in the executive committee meeting instead of the board meeting, because with having consumer board members, it is sometimes of a touchy thing, is that we really can't be talking about staff and staff issues at the board, because consumers will let every other consumer in the place know what was going on. So we have to try to keep the privacy of the staff private. So anyway, so we do a lot of things with the executive committee. But when you do have an executive session, you have to be stated as a motion when it returns to the open session. And if you have to have an executive session so that you can make a decision, the decision still needs to be something that needs to be recorded in the executive session. Sometimes, depending on what the sensitive matter may be, you may have a separate addendum to the minutes that have just the minutes for the executive session, so that they are there and that you do have documentation to them, but they are not necessarily for everybody to see because of the sensitive nature of what was discussed. And I think we're ready for questions, Tim.
That's right. All right. So we've got time for our Q&A break now. Again, you can type your questions in the Q&A tab on Zoom. And if you type them in the chat or the full screen cart, we'll capture them there too. I know we had one question come in a few minutes ago while we were talking. Is it appropriate to have a CIL staff member on the CIL's board? Paula, you want to tackle that?
I will. We don't feel that that's ever good practice. sometimes the executive director, according to the bylaws, is on the board, but it makes it difficult for the board to function as a board if even the executive director is on the board. As soon as you put any of the executive director's staff on the board, you make it even more difficult. So no, we would never recommend that a board include staff members on it in its group. And you can do a little research on that with the other nonprofits, but I think you'll find that's pretty unanimous.
All right, we've got time for other questions. I'll give about 15 seconds to see if any more roll in. Again, you can type them in the Q&A tab there. Okay, Nancy is wondering, for executive sessions, do you take minutes? Are minutes recorded, Ann?
Yes, the minutes are recorded, but like I had mentioned, you, depending on what the executive session is about, if it's a sensitive matter about a staff person, like whether you're going to have to terminate somebody or something, you make sure that you have minutes, you make sure that you capture any motions that are made during the executive session, but you may not, like when you're distributing the minutes for that meeting to be approved, you would not necessarily distribute the executive session minutes to everyone who wasn't involved in the executive session meeting, that you just give those to the people who were involved, so that you do have that recorded. For instance, if you do have an executive session about terminating somebody, and at some point, for whatever reason, an auditor may ask, well, how come, this person was let go or something, we would be able to show them the minutes of where there had been a discussion and where it had been, the motion had been made and decided to do that.
Yeah, one of the ones that I see the most frequently is back when we had regular compliance visits. One of the compliance questions was, to the board, have you evaluated the performance of the executive director? And the board would say, oh yeah, we did that. But there were no minutes because they didn't keep minutes of their executive sessions. And so they couldn't show that they had done that. And it's really valuable to keep those minutes in a separate notebook for executive sessions, but have them available.
Great. All right, good questions. All right, Mark is wondering, do you have any suggestions on dealing with staff that come to board members and complain about the ED? So how do you tackle those tricky situations where people are circumventing the ED and going straight to board members?
I would like to answer that.
Please do.
Because I had a situation about 20 years ago where I had a couple disgruntled staff members who were kind of, a strong staff members, as the people go at the time. And they started talking to a couple of the board members that they knew, that they were somewhat acquainted with at City Hall, because they were involved in a couple of things. And one thing led to another, and then we were having a board meeting because they had convinced the board that they needed to fire me. And the board had 2 or 3 members of them that had been on since the very beginning, and they were saying, well, I think that if you would fire her, you're going to have to explain what just was the reason to RSA, because, they always have some say about who was, who is approved. Well, now ACL is the one who does that. And the whole thing came about because I had 2 or 3 board members who were listening to the staff. And that's what I talked about at the next board meeting was, if the staff come to you, you need to say to them, you are supposed to go to the executive director. You need to go to the executive director. And that they have to do that, that if they talk to them, they'll undermine what it is that you're saying. And so now I have a personal policy, and I will tell staff that if you go to the board to either, whether it's a complaint about me or a complaint about not getting a raise or whatever it is, that I'm going to terminate your employment. So that's how I handle it now.
Yeah, and it is just, you can't operate if you've got people running to the board. So the board training has to include that too.
Yep.
They really can't go out.
Absolutely. All right, let me get through this last question, and then we're going to get back to the presentation. Sherry asks, their funding agency within the state of Florida has required that CILs come under the Sunshine Law for board meetings. Does that preclude going into executive session, Paula?
Not typically, although the sunshine laws vary from state to state, so we can't really speak to that one specifically. But most sunshine laws do allow for executive session for two reasons. And the first is when you're meeting with your legal counsel to preserve attorney-client privilege. And the second one is related to personnel. And typically you can do that in executive session. Although I ran into one state, interestingly enough, where if it was a personnel issue, the personnel being considered had to be invited to that meeting, even though the public was barred. So every state's different, and you need to know your own law.
Okay, good. All right, and I do want to get back to, we've got a quick question from Despina. Despina asks, Ann, I know you said that your consumers are automatically lifetime members of your CIL and that others can pay to be members a minimum of $5. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, great. All right, so we're a bit tight on time. We've got 12 minutes to go through the rest of these slides. We're going to do our best to move quickly through them. I'm going to go to slide 32 and let Paula get us started.
All right, sounds good. We won't spend a lot of time on this, but do make sure that your executive director evaluation is a process that is defined and that you're helping your board with this. And I do want to encourage you that the ED can make sure that the goals in the strategic plan are part of that review. Typically, the board wants your help to do this. Now, they may not always. Sometimes they have somebody who's really into coming up with the tool and doing their own thing. But typically, they do want you to take some kind of lead because they're not there day to day. And so for you to either suggest, these are the goals that I had last year that you set, and provide that to them, or to take the lead in the discussion about last year's progress. Of course, you still want to hear from the board, but it's okay for your evaluation to be, based on whatever you said last time, based on a tool everybody agreed to, based on a process that everybody agreed to. On that next slide, this is really more about the conversation between you and your board than it is about what checklist you use or what tool you use. There are a lot of them out there. Again, you can get them from any of the nonprofit websites, but what you want to do is make sure that it's done. And one of the best ones I ever saw was 4 questions. And one of the questions was, what are the things that you feel that were done that you feel were positive? And the next question was, what are the things that happened this year that you'd like to improve on? And then the next one was, what are the goals for the next year, and how will you meet them? And what were the goals for the last year, and how did you meet them? 4 questions, but they were open-ended, got a lot of conversation going, and can be really valuable. Let's look at the next slide. So your board may need help doing this on a timely basis. You usually have an annual review. So a few months before it's over, 2 or 3 months before it's due, put it on the agenda and make sure that you all have agreed to what the process is going to be. Ask for a date and who's going to conduct it. Make sure you pin them down. It's okay to do that, because I know if you wait for the board, sometimes it won't ever get done. And you want regular evaluations just to make sure that you are continually on track with what the board's expecting and that they understand what you're required to do based on your regulations. Next slide. So, am I doing this one too? I am, huh? Yeah, fund development. Let's not talk a lot about this because we will continually do training on this, but one of the things that you need to let the board members know is that they are expected to financially support your center. And also you need to identify the ones that have connections to things like bank trustees who manage estates, who might be looking for charities, or to related to a local foundation or anything like that. And they also, everybody needs to contribute. It doesn't matter how much. You can say you have 100% participation if the person who really doesn't have any extra money gives you $1, but you want your board to be 100% involved in being donors to your center. Next slide. So do invite consumers to meetings with potential board members too, so that they can share how the center helps them, and so that that can be part of what you talk about. Invite them to attend meetings with possible donors to give a face to the work that's being done. Let them tell their stories. And if they're willing, they can be involved in many other aspects of the organization as well. So not just board members who are people with disabilities, but other folks who have been a part of it can be a part of that. So I think that's next for Ann.
Ann, you got to turn on your mic again.
Okay,
Sorry.
the next section that we're talking about is succession planning. And if you're at a point that you're thinking that it's time for you to move on to a new job, or it's time for you to retire, there are a lot of things that you need to consider as the executive director that you need to leave behind information. And it's like one of the other center directors in West Virginia had said, you know, I just can't take the hard drive out of my brain and leave it here for them. And, you know, it really becomes an issue with you thinking about, oh my gosh, you know, how do you tell them everything that you know? So anyways, it's very important for you to start thinking about everything that you do. There's a lot of things that you know as a director that have to be done with such things as SAM, the administrative management thing for the federal government that you have to register every year. You have things with your PMS when you're getting your funding drawn down. You have the 704 PPR. And, you know, so there are a lot of little things that those kind of things they need to have the answers to. They need to have passwords. You need to make sure that you change the passwords when the new person comes. There's a lot of little things. And one of the things that I've started doing is I have a file cabinet drawer that I call my critical information drawer. And every time something comes up that you don't necessarily think about, I'll jot it down or I'll throw it in that file. Just like the other day, Angie was trying to do the purchase order to pay the nickel dues. And she hadn't done that before, and our new accounting person hadn't done that before. So they brought me a purchase order for our dues based on our entire annual budget. And so I showed them how that on the financial thing on the 704 report and yada yada, go through that and the pass-through money and all this, and that this final figure here is what the dues are based on. So we got that straightened out, and I thought, okay, that's something they need to know. So I scribbled a note to throw into my drawer that somebody needs to know how to figure out the dues for nickel. So next slide. This is really talking about things about the notice to the boards about when to do it and to allow ample time and all that to do that. But go on to the next slide, because I think we need to talk about the ACL, IL things. Yeah. There are a couple documents, and I think the link is on the next page, that ACL and ILA have about Centers for Independent Living and the requirements for the boards and the boards to do when there is a change in, quote, key personnel. And so for the purpose of this FAQ, its key personnel refers to the CIL director or the interim director. Next slide. Okay, So there's a checkoff list, okay? Your project officer that you have at ILA, you need to let them know as soon as possible that it's about to change. You need to provide the director with the checklist so that they can, or the director should provide it to the board, the checklist of the things that have to be done about recruiting and promoting. You need to provide the board with your project officers information so that you can talk to them about things, about the selection process and etc. This note down here on the bottom has the website, ILRU website, that will give you the 2 handouts that ACL ILA have released about what to do during a change in key personnel. Next slide, Tim. This is the other part, and I talked about a critical information file to leave as much information as you can, how your passwords are set up. They all need to be changed, how you store information on your computer, what they need to keep, making sure that they understand that, the due dates for everything. It's just, it becomes almost overwhelming, but every time you do something on behalf of the center, you almost can say, I need to put that in that critical information file. Next slide. Okay, make sure that as you're going through the year that you take notes on what's happened. We have the Journey of Hope Abilities Experience bicycle groups that start out in Seattle and in San Francisco, and they ride bikes across the country and meet in DC, and we're on their route, and so they always stop here and have dinner, what they call a friendship dinner, so they can meet consumers. And so we have to have somebody in charge of that, and we do press releases, and we get the mayor to do a proclamation and things. So those all things need to be written down as things that are happening during the year, so that you'll be able to write it down when you think of it, as far as trying to help somebody know what to do when they're not there. And hopefully you can do this even if you're not thinking about leaving, but that you do have information written down, because something may come up and you may not be leaving, but are leaving when you didn't expect to. And so you want to leave as much stuff for people as you can. I think that's it.
All right, great job. Okay, so we had to go through that kind of quickly, but you all have the content there, and I think Paula and Ann did a great job of covering the hotspots there. We've got a couple questions that came in. These are simple. Let's start there. Nancy asked if you all have any sample ED forms. Ann, is that something you have that you'd be able to share?
An evaluation form?
For the ED specifically?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, great. If that's something you could share with us, we could post it on the training page and get it out of the audience. Paula, I know you work with a lot of different centers. If you have anything you want to share too, that'd be great.
Okay.
And then Tina asked if we could define the regular occurrence for ED evaluations. I think that'd be annually. I don't know if you all have anything to add to that, but that would be
typically annually. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll see if, we'll just give just about 10 seconds to see if any other questions come in. I'm sorry for the abbreviated Q&A period. We are happy to take your questions after the fact. So if you all think of questions later and want to send them to us, we'll make sure to respond to them. Let's see if we can get through a couple of these in the next minute or two. Mary asks, do you have an example of a 10-year strategic plan? Mary,
yeah, I have. I could send them or send a copy of our strategic plan, but that's what my sample would be our 10-year strategic plan.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share a copy of Nichols as well, which of course is also posted on our website. And Despina asks, equally, an evaluation template for the board would be great too. Simple, not complicated. I liked the 4-question ED eval that Paula mentioned. Yeah, that was a great example. And should the ED be notified when there is an executive session?
Oh, is that a good question? Yeah. If boards are meeting without telling the ED about the executive session, you've got bigger problems than you can even imagine. They have no business meeting without you unless they've tried to talk with you about whatever it is they're not happy with. But they should not be meeting. And I've heard from executive directors who say, oh, every meeting, they want an executive committee meeting without me, and they ask me to leave, and I don't have any idea what they're talking about. This is not going to be helpful to your relationship between the board and the executive director. If you can't have a more open relationship about anything that you're concerned about, that's problematic. I've also seen them do it with using that as the way that they're doing the evaluation of the executive director. So they say, oh, we're working on the form. I think it's really problematic to have executive sessions without doing that.
Yep, agreed. Well said. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and close. I want to just point out before we disconnect the evaluation form. This evaluation form, this isn't a live link, but when I close the webinar, the evaluation is actually going to open on your screen. And I just ask that you please take a moment to fill that out and let us know what you think. We are always looking for ways to improve these webinars, and you all are our audience and our best respondents to give us feedback on these. So let us know what you like. Let us know certainly what we can improve. It only takes a minute to finish, and I hope you'll share your thoughts with us today. If you truly don't have time to do it when the webinar closes, I know it's always hard to remember to go back and do it, but the link was in the confirmation email that you received. We would really love to have your thoughts. I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your days to be with us. I hope this has been helpful. Don't forget that archive version, just as it happened today, will be posted to ILRU's website by the end of the week. So whether you want to revisit it or whether you want to share it with your colleagues or your board members, please know that'll be available for you. And of course, I want to thank Paula and Ann. Paula and Ann, thank you so much for being with us, for sharing your expertise, all your good examples and stories. We really do appreciate it. So anyway, everyone have a wonderful afternoon. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.